All right. Hello, everyone. And I am back with the Brothers Gwynne, Ed and Will, not Ed and Ed. And it is, again, such a privilege and an honor and a joy to be here with them. We just had our spoiler-free discussion of my first book, The Way of Edan. And now the three of us are going to have a spoiler-filled discussion. So this video will probably come out much later than the previous one, depending on how long it takes for the book to be published. But it's going to be fun looking back on this conversation, isn't it, gents?
Oh yeah,
it will for sure.
So Ed and Will have been so kind to read my book, and they are going to give me some feedback. This is going to be an exercise, as well as kind of a spoiler-filled talk about scenes and stuff. I'm going to get some tips and suggestions, which I'm very, very eager to hear from these two, because I have an immense amount of respect for them as readers, and I know future storytellers themselves. So I am excited to hear this feedback, and I might even be able to incorporate some of it into the finished version of the book, as I no doubt will have some future editing to do as I work hopefully with a publisher, with an editor at a publishing house. So guys, I am very, very keen to hear these specific pointers and questions and suggestions. So wherever you guys want to start, I'm ready to go.
Well, it's so funny with editing and feedback, because we know from Papa Gwynne's experience that we'll read a scene that or a few chapters that he sent us, and then his editor will read it, and she'll have completely different ideas to us, and we're like, no, Julie, you can't do that. And then, but she, I mean, in her publishing house, she's such an expert, and her experience is so good. So, and usually she's more right than us, isn't she?
Yeah, and so, Dad's kind of rule is if everyone says something, then he will change it. But then if it's only a few people, then he'll kind of think on it himself. And Julie is she's a brilliant editor. She's one with a red pen out at everything.
Oh yeah, she's notorious. Yeah, and she's always wanting to kill more characters that we love. It is funny because it's got to the point where we have to not let it known that we love certain characters, because then Julie will want us to kill them. So,
well, she better not touch Svik. I have to say that right now. Yeah,
I know. Yeah, in book one, she's like, he's got to die. It's like, no, come on. No, I don't even know if she did say that. I'm probably making it up just to feel sorry for myself and my cheese-loving ways. But
although she might just deprive him of cheese, so you never know.
That would be worse.
That's punishment enough,
really, wouldn't it? Yeah. But no, thank you again, Philip. I mean, we haven't spoken in a very long time. It's wonderful to read your book, The Way of Edan. Is it Edan?
Yes, you guys were saying it correctly. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's good to hear the pronunciation. It's like the book of the Malazan? Is it Malazan?
Oh, the Malazan, yes, yeah. Malazan, a lot of people will say Malazan. But it's the Malazan Book of the Fallen. Although Stephen Erickson, and I plan to be this way too, whatever people say is fine, not going to be super picky there. But it is the way that the authors pronounce it is Malazan. Yeah.
And pronunciation will probably come into this a lot, because the names that you've chosen for the places and the characters in your world are really influenced by lots of things that we might have read, lots of mythology as well, lots of the old original sources that Tolkien was definitely inspired by as well. I've noticed lots of kind of saga references and references to old English poems that we've also spoken about before. So I'm sure we'll get into that in our spoiler talk.
And again, we just want to say it's been an honor of ours to read this, and we just had a spoiler-free chat, so we'll probably be touching on similar things again, but with a spoiler element in there as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it very much.
The way that I don't know about you, Will, but that I've made notes chronologically, so I've kind of written on my phone my reactions to certain things, and like lots of it is little details that really might not add much to that very chapter, but in the big picture, it's like all these little details. Also lots of nerdy things that I even mentioned. I like your description of carvings. So there you go. There's that kind of feedback you might get from me. So
I love it.
Let's start at the beginning then. Your very first chapter, you're straight in there with this kind of religious ceremony, and then your main POV bites the dust. So
Yeah.
I mean, that was a big shock straight away, wasn't it, Will?
Yeah. I think it's great that I was like, okay, I really felt the tension straight away. And you hadn't really told us a lot of what it was about, so it was quite nice going there quite blindfolded. And I was like, okay, this is what we're going into. And yeah, the ending of that prologue with, as Ed said, the POV biting the dust, as you nicely put it. That was a shock. You don't really see that in much. And then, I'll say my next thought in a minute, but let's talk about the prologue first.
It made me think of, I don't know if you've seen Conan the Barbarian, the film, but the Thulsa Doom cult. It felt a little bit like that, where these people are doing anything for Thulsa Doom. He even like tells someone to jump off a cliff and they do it. So they're doing this for who they think is their deity, which is really exciting. And they start doing not very nice things and throwing dung at people, which you just can't do anymore.
Yeah, that prologue is a signal that what I'm doing here, religion is going to be a big part of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
The book basically gives you the beginning of what is a religious war in largely. So that is a signal for sure. And the fact that it ends with a death or deaths, violent, is also just it is a signal of a sort. And what I'm hoping is that people will see how it's linked to the beginning of the first chapter, where there's a different locale, but there's also a death, and there's a person in a white robe present as well. But and that's sort of saying these deaths are connected to this death, and that's sort of an attempt at a signal. So
yeah. I was going to say, with that influence of like religion in there, I was going to say that religion is such a huge influence on the world we live in, whether we're religious personally or not. And especially in fantasy, I feel like that's something that has been kind of neglected. And so it's really interesting straight away knowing, okay, like this is going to be playing on the ideas of religion, and it immediately just made me have no doubt that this world is going to be fleshed out with people who actually have different opinions to each other, different cultures. And that's something that I was not let down on at all as I went through the rest.
Yeah, I think lots of authors might shy away from religion because it's so close to obviously our own world today, and you want to make it feel a bit more alien. But I like the way that you did it, and I think religion might be obviously, like you say, is a big part of your books, and it's quite exciting that another series will be coming out that has this kind of to play in. Is there a reason why you chose to? So the people go in, and within the religious ceremony, they throw dung at people, and they don't, they're not shouting things, they're not burning it down. Is there a reason why you chose that kind of medium in between?
Yes, yeah. So I want to give the idea, first of all, through the POV there, that he believes that this is an act of love.
Yeah.
That he believes he is doing this yes, he's doing it for his deity, in whom he loves and adores. But he's also doing it because in his heart, he really believes that what he's doing is for the benefit of the people that he is essentially insulting by throwing dung at their most sacred place. And that he's called to do this. And I think that authors probably haven't written a lot about religion and fantasy because it is potentially controversial. And it's important for me to note that I'm not writing about any one religion with any of these are fictional religions. They don't exist. They might bear some similarities here and there to one religion or another, but there are at least 4 different religions in this world that I've made, and they're all fictional. And I like exploring that. I like exploring these different approaches to religion. And our responses to important questions like, what happens to us when we die? So there's that's something I'm fascinated by. I come from a religious background. My father and grandfather, and also a great grandfather, were all ministers, Protestant ministers. So it's something that I think have thought about a lot in my life. And how we're formed by our religious views, and how I think most people would, if they're honest, admit they sometimes go through periods of doubt or wondering and exploring and all of that. So it's a huge part of what I'm doing here is how are our worldviews formed by our societies and their beliefs, and sometimes being confronted with something that is very different from those beliefs. How do we react to that? Are we shattered by that? Do we change as people? Do we resist? Do we deny? There's just a range of responses to that, and that's something I'm trying to explore as well.
Yeah, and that really comes across, as we said, it's straight away in that prologue, but then you get a really nuanced look at it all through the different perspectives that you have. And you said that there's numerous religions, numerous cultures, and in the spoiler-free video that came out, we don't know how long ago, that I think Ed mentioned that the strength of having multiple POVs, and this is another one of those. And I think you use it really well. And those range of POVs is a very nice commentary on your own world, and how they view different people, these different prejudices, and I think it's just really explored really well. And to summarize the impact of the prologue, I think I can certainly say I was hooked.
Yeah. It starts with that shock, doesn't it? Which is what you need. The first few chapters are so important to get the reader in there, just to kind of sink your hooks in. And I think you did a really good job, definitely, with there. And then, leading on into the second chapter, there's an even bigger shock, isn't there?
Yeah, you have Oswy, and then straight away, and then he dies. That's where it really, I was like, it's going to be something different, because that really just subverted my expectations. Where it shocked me in the prologue with the POV dying, and I was like, okay, I've seen that once or twice before, but it still shocked me. And I was like, now we've met our main character. No, Oswy was gone pretty swiftly as well, and in a not in a sick way, but I loved that.
I feel a little guilty for killing Oswy that way.
What has he ever done to you, Philip? Come on.
I know he's a nice kid, but that again is deliberate. And once again, I do want to emphasize how, in my mind, his death is very connected to the deaths of Finan and his companions in the prologue, and how it's important too that a white robe shows up there in that portion as well. So that's a signal. That's sort of a nod that, okay, guys, these two things, geographically they're way far apart in this world. You can see on the map if you care to, and even chronologically, there's a gap there between these two deaths, but they're very, very connected.
And that white robe acts as a symbol.
It's a motif, isn't it?
Yeah. And then when we encounter some more people in white robes later on, we're instantly like, these people are bad. But then it becomes a lot more nuanced again, and it balances out. It's not just good guys, bad guys. And I really loved that section straight after Oswy's death, with the soldiers in the white robe and talking about I had so many questions straight away, and I feel in a lot of books it takes you quite a while to have those questions in your head that you want to find out about, and that's really what gets me hooked. I love to be finding out more about the world or plot, and I think instantly within however many pages I had so many questions that I was just engaged, and I could not have put this down because I needed to know those answers.
Good, thank you. Yeah, that's the goal for sure.
The prologue felt a little bit, I don't know, you've read The Rage of Dragons, haven't you, Philip?
Yes. Yes.
It's that time difference as well, and it's set, you feel it's setting up for what's to come, that the ripple of that one action is going to be monumental. But then the second POV is they're dying as well, and like I said, the reader's immediately immersed, and it feels a bit like a mystery, and you already feel like you can put some dots together because you've got the white robe reappearing, so it's like you're making those connections already, which is exciting for the reader anyway, so it gets them pumped to read more.
And I'd say with that scene with the soldiers, I would have my first suggestion, which it might just be me who thought this, I wanted to know even less. Like, you get quite a few questions answered in that bit, and I thought that if that was maybe even shorter, I think that might have been even more impactful. It might just be me, but I loved it, and I thought that maybe even less questions answered, because they are that you are confronted with them again later on, as I'm sure we'll get to.
So a little less telling in that scene, perhaps.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, that's my suggestion. I'm not sure. Did you think the same, Ed? Or?
Yeah, I didn't really notice that. William's a lot better at kind of picking out lots of more details, aren't you, and kind of making those connections, but and thinking that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, that sounds good. Like we could we're already making those connections with the white robes, so and make them seem hold even more back, hold the cards a bit closer to their chest would be quite a good idea. Yeah,
I think it's testament to your skill, Philip, that within that time we knew this white robe was a symbol already, where it wasn't really in your face and jarring, but it's just, I think readers will know this is what the white robe means. And I think most other authors would have to have a bit more telling to really let the reader know, but I think you've got a natural ability that the readers are in the know as much as you want them to be.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing, absolutely, to know how much telling do I need to do here, and how much should I just stick with showing here and let them sort of figure it out, and let's let this mystery steep a little bit, you know. So yeah, I'm delighted to hear that feedback.
I'm sure it's really hard for you, because you obviously, again, thinking of that, you know where this is all going.
Exactly.
Well, I know these are clues, but with readers, and it must be really hard line to hit there.
And obviously we know how much you love the Book of the Malazan, but immediately reading that, I hadn't got a Scooby what was going on the whole time. So at the beginning, sure, with a reread it'd be much better, but at the beginning you're just like, what the hell is going on? I was anyway. So I think you've got a good balance there. You've got a bit of mystery, and then like William says, maybe a few less questions, and maybe someone of my intellect could even piece it together. Who knows?
Okay, great, love it.
Excellent. Oh, I've got a really terrible point here, Philip, and it's like a reenactor thing. I hate myself for it. But
this is good. This is good.
It's like, like the swords on the back kind of thing. It's like, it's like, they didn't do that as much as people think. But some people wear some quivers on their back, so maybe pop that on their belts or on their horses, that kind of thing.
Even then, I think a lot of quivers were worn at the side, right? Not so much on the back.
Yeah. So that's it for me. It's just terrible. I had to get out there.
So you're not a fan of the baldric?
I don't mind the baldric's okay if it's coming across and the sword's still at the hip, so that's good. There are lots of finds in Viking graves of baldric's, that kind of thing.
It's here, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's actually easier than being on the belt there, because it's kind of a separate piece and you can lift it and that kind of stuff. So, but yeah.
Good. I love this. Yeah, I mean, you guys. No doubt, because I had to look stuff up, and you guys are reenactors, and that's valuable. So,
well, we love that you say Bernie.
Yes. Oh, Bernie. Yes, of course.
Yeah. Obviously, the Old Norse would be Brynja, but Bernie is the old.
Bernie is the Old English, and Brynja is the Old Norse, essentially, and it means chainmail, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We got to go with Bernie. Yeah.
And it's funny because obviously people always say chainmail, and in lots of fantasy you read from like the 80s and that kind of stuff, or like even like Robert E. Howard, he'll say chainmail, but that's a myth as well, because they weren't made in a chain. I can't remember how it is, but it's funny. But Bernie is, when I read that, I was like, yes.
Good.
Just a little nod there. I mean, I've written here, I love all the Saxon, the older English names. It's just immediately you feel like you're reading something that's so different, and it just feels like a whole culture apart. But also you've got the similarity of Tolkien's names and the inspiration there, and it felt a little bit like coming home, that kind of thing. When you read the first chapter with Dayraven, which is fantastic name, but it definitely felt a bit like I was riding back to my old village, and it was just felt nice for me, and just to read those names, and like what we've seen in poems and whatnot. It was exciting. Anyway,
I was going to touch on that, the next section. So Ed said in the spoiler-free segment that he felt it was Tolkien world with Gemmel characters invading it. And I said that I really felt like that as well, especially in the beginning, that traditional fantasy inspiration, and then it becomes a bit more you see the modern influences as characters get disillusioned to what the world is like. But I think you do it in such a way where we've had the opening, we know this is going to get darker, and then we meet Dayraven and we see that he's got very rose-tinted glasses. He sees the world, and that's where you get kind of that, as I said, that Shire aspect where I want to live here. It feels nice.
I could see you guys living in a place like that. Totally.
Yeah, we would love it.
But I think it's fantastic how whilst people will be like enjoying this, it's just nice atmosphere for a little while. It doesn't last too long, but they'll really enjoy that. But then with the know that, well, how this has started, things aren't going to be staying like this, and I think that adds tension. Which just through adding that beginning, instead of just jumping straight in with Dayrhaven, it makes such a big difference, I think.
Yeah, because you've got this kind of unwavering drumbeat of dread is echoing from the first couple of chapters, and then you go into Dayrhaven, and it's like that's still looming, but you're just living in the moment. He's kind of practicing with his sword play, and he's meeting all the people around him and his family, and Imhar. Special shout out to Imhar, who's just, I think by the end was my favorite character. I don't know, what was he like to write, Philip? Did you enjoy writing him?
Oh, I love Imhar. Yeah, I mean, he's for me the easier of the two to write in some ways, because he feels more. I guess he feels more solid to me. He's somebody, and he has a past as well that has not immediately apparent that that pain is there, but he's a very, on the surface, at least, fun person to be around. I mean, he was somebody that I really enjoyed writing a lot. And you might also like to enjoy hearing about the a couple things. One, the landscape that I'm describing there in that beginning, that sort of Shire-like place, which is very much what I was going for. But that landscape is absolutely based on my home state of Vermont. I mean, just from the types of flowers that you would have in the meadows to the hills and the clouds with their shadows morphing over the hills and all that. I'm picturing Vermont there. So, and which is, I think, in many ways kind of Shire-like too.
It sounded beautiful. And I mean, I'm a big fan of Cormac McCarthy, and my favorite book of his is Blood Meridian. And in Blood Meridian, McCarthy uses the landscape as kind of another character, that he describes it in such like brutal and archaic ways that it just adds another layer of immersion, which we were talking about in our last video. And I think the way you describe the countryside and the landscape, it adds the immersion. But instead of Cormac McCarthy doing it as a kind of a dark foreboding sense, you tip it on its head and you do it in that kind of, it feels important to Dayrhaven, and like it feels like he knows everything. He knows everything so well, and that's why we feel that you included that detail, because he knows, he's lived there all of his life and he loves being there. A bit like Frodo is in the Shire, he's got this love of it, and he knows all the roots around the Shire and all the people, and that's really nice. And it immediately felt like that drum beat was kind of disappearing into the distance.
And you've mentioned before that you got a lot of the inspiration for the landscapes from where you've traveled, and I really feel that in how real and vivid all these landscapes are. I mean, it's quite spectacular how you bring them all to life without being too dramatic, or it feels real. Whilst quite a bit like Ursula K. Le Guin as well. I've only read the first book in the Earthsea, but how the world feels alive and quite magical in a sense as well, whether in a dark way or a happy way as well. And we see both sides of that.
Wonderful. Yeah, so glad to hear that. I was very much trying for that. And for me, I almost was worried about it because I really enjoy landscapes, and I know that's not necessarily why people read books. They want the story. Come on, let's go. So I did have to restrain myself sometimes, like when I was describing the forest that Dayrhaven wanders into a little bit later. I had to say, okay, maybe I've done a little too much here. Let's just hold back a little bit, because I really enjoy that sort of thing. But another interesting thing, maybe you would enjoy hearing, the name Dayrhaven, of course, among all these Old English inspired names, most of them I've kept the old form. Dayrhaven is, to our ears, a much more modern sounding name. You can hear what it's made out of. It is an Old English name, however. In Beowulf, there is a character mentioned briefly named Dayrhaven, which is Dayrhaven. And I always thought that is the coolest name. Somebody should do something with that. And that was kind of just the early idea for this character, was seeing this name, and it just, the name itself just sparked a kind of an interest. Like, who is this guy Dayrhaven? In Beowulf, he's just a warrior among the Franks, I think, that Beowulf kills. They just mentioned
Yeah.
briefly in the latter part of the poem. So I thought that's a waste of a good name. Somebody needs to write a story with that name. So that's where that comes from.
Oh, I love that. Any more anecdotes you have, please keep us updated as we go through. But I love how the way that you chose to keep the name in that form, Dayraven, and then use it as kind of a storytelling aspect. I think that's so good. And it's exciting for the reader because it gives Dayraven a bit of like individuality, you know, and you feel like you're in the head of this person who's a little bit different to everyone else, which I really enjoyed reading about.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if you mentioned it, you see in a lot of books that the main character, they're very, like, they want to know about the world and they often hear a story from someone else. But in this first chapter of Dayraven, he's the one telling a story. And I just loved how that has kind of subverted his change. And it shows that, I think a lot of books, it can feel like this character is only like it feels like they've not actually had a life before you've met them. And that's where they start actually having passions and everything. But you can feel, okay, look, we're joining Dayraven as he's already had a portion of his life and he has this passion, and then telling that story, it just really emphasized what kind of character he is and really brought him to life straight away. And I just loved that aspect that you added there.
And knowing your reading taste, Philip, when I saw that Dayraven was having a good time, you know, he's got a good thing going for him, I was like, this is not going to last.
Yeah, I know. You know, when there's a happy relationship in the beginning, there's something awful is about to happen. Right?
Yeah, 100%. But that's a really good point, Will. I love that he tells a story, and that is another aspect that you've got there, which reminds me of Tolkien, that as well as the landscapes, the beautiful landscape, you've got a rich history which is displayed in stories and poems and songs about people, which we'll talk about the songs later.
Yeah,
but I've written out whole segments of these songs because I just love them so much.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, no, that's an aspect of Tolkien that I love. And it's also, it goes back to the Old English sources that both Tolkien and I have been inspired by, because if you read Beowulf, it's not a narrative that goes chronologically from A to Z. It actually, there's all these side stories and these different narratives that thematically feed into the tone of the poem as a whole. They may seem like distractions, you know, and that they hold back the pace or whatever in Beowulf, but they're important because they really do. They're telling the listener or the reader, this is what this is all about. This is about life's fleetingness. This is about loss. This is about how you cope. And that's what all those are for. So they have a purpose there. So I'm definitely giving a little nod to the old source material by having Dayraven tell a story early on. And of course, the information in the story becomes important for the plot of the book too.
That's what I was going to say. These stories that you tell through it, they feel very natural. Like, okay, I'm not saying this just for the plot, but the story, it feels like it's relevant to the moment that they are in. But then it also feeds into how the story evolves. And I think that was really well done, where it's like these stories are told so well, and it's one of your many strengths in The Way of Edan. But then it's used the perfect amount, I think, where it's feeding into the story. And every time we got it, like we'll talk about the song of King Fulkwalder, I think it was. We'll be talking about that later, that we adored. And I think also at the same time telling the story, it really enforced Dayraven's character at the same time, because you really got that idea of that young adult excitedness and that passion as well, which can be very naive, but there's a charm to it at the same time. I think a lot of people say that King is the best at that, and I think that you've really got the essence of Dayraven there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I love the way in which Ebba, his companion, sort of knocks away a bit of his idealism there, you know, at times, and gives him a little bit of feedback during the story. And he's kind of like having to, okay, fine, yes, you're right, you know.
Yeah. Let's just forget about that part.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. So it's always funny with authors. Sometimes they don't like to describe people too much. Then other times they describe people in a lot of detail. Is that kind of, did you think you didn't describe them too much to leave it kind of more open for the reader's imagination?
Yeah, so it depends on who the POV is. If I have a chapter where Dayraven's the POV, it would be weird to describe Dayraven. But I didn't mind describing Imhar during that scene in the beginning where, okay, he has curly black hair, and he kind of puts the curls aside or whatever, because you know, he's a good looking guy. There's a little flick there. Exactly. Whereas I don't actually describe Dayraven much physically until he's later on out cold. And then because it's really more his father who's carrying him and bringing him back to to Kinsford. That's where I first really kind of describe him. He has a little bit of a cut on his face and but just what he looks like a little bit there. So I had to wait, in other words, until it was the right time to describe him and not try to just every time you meet a new character, give a list of their characteristics. Not a good narrative technique.
No, and I think you had such a good balance there, and you did that so well. And I'm glad you said that, because that was like a thing that you really intended to do, because you don't describe everyone in such heavy detail, because the reader doesn't need to know, do they? You're writing things that they really need to know at the beginning, and that story was such a nice part between Dayraven's relationship as well, and with the world around him and the people as well. So that was cool. And I think the only note for me was I just kind of wanted to see a bit more of like their culture, whether it's in like the way that they look, or the way they dress, or even like the way they greet each other. It's one thing that I took from watching The Northman, which probably does it too much, where it's too immersive at points, where it's too alien. But I think, like, when you immediately arrive in Rohan in Lord of the Rings and the Two Towers, and the Hall of Meduseld is so different to anywhere you've seen before. Every culture feels so different, even the way they speak. And I think I just wanted kind of even more from that, whether it's the way they dressed, or like different roles in their families, that kind of thing. So
neat.
That's great. And then after that we meet Sakara. Is that how you pronounce it?
That's fine. I actually say Sequara, but that's how I pronounce her name. But yes,
you should be the one to know, Philip.
We'll go with that now. And I loved this chapter of there's that contrast with Dayraven, that now there's this sense of absolute duty above anything else, where Dayraven is he's kind of enjoying these fantasies, but you see the burden straight away in this chapter. And I really loved how it really showed a different tone straight away. And there's the idea where she goes back to where she used to live, and this contrast of life before and life after, and the effect it's had. That it's not entirely positive, but at the same time, it's installed her with this sense of purpose, which drives her life, really. And I think you immediately sympathise with her because of the situation she's in. But at the same time, you don't really know why she's been put in this position. And again, it's more of those, as I was saying earlier, the hooks. And you set another one in there again, Philip, because I was hooked and I wanted to know, why is she in this position?
And you're meeting people in such different points in their lives that it's really important, I think, for the reader to feel like then, it's not like not everyone's the Wheel of Time, where the characters are all very similar in age. I haven't read the Wheel of Time, but just for example, but everyone is very, they're all very different so far, aren't they? So which is exciting.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was very important for me because she's obviously an extremely important character here. And I wanted to give the reader a sense of who she is, with, again, like you say, not revealing too much, and give a sense of her inner struggles with where she is in her life and the expectations that have been put on her, and how she's become this person that we see suddenly in this chapter. And I wanted also to, in addition to having her be a point of contrast, because the culture is obviously very different. The people physically, the skin tone is different. It's an island, as opposed to this northern kingdom. But I also wanted to show there's a connection too, in that in the first, in the prologue, as we pointed out, there's a death or deaths. And then in the first chapter, a boy dies. In Sequara's chapter, her opening chapter, there's a little girl who does not die because of Sequara. And I wanted there to be a kind of okay, here's a point of contrast here and connection between these chapters. And that was important for me to kind of point out.
And it also establishes her as a powerful figure as well.
Yes, and we get to show a little bit of magic there. In the process.
You're just teasing all these different elements straight away, which is it's so much fun. It feels like you've you've had, like, imagine it's like a film. You've zoomed in, and then with each new chapter, you're kind of just zooming out just a little bit, a bit more detail. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, the one suggestion I'd have is I think it's quite a while before we're back with her.
Yes.
And with that, then it took me a few paragraphs to kind of get back into a character.
Yeah.
And so
later, like I think it's like 7 chapters later or something.
Yeah. And so my suggestion maybe place chapter 2 as chapter 3 or something like that, maybe to bring them a tiny bit closer together.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Yeah, I almost thought about writing another Sequara chapter just to go back to that character, but then I was thinking, well, what is she doing? She's just sailing, you know, from A to B, and there's not a lot I can do. I already did some, you know, so moving the chapter maybe would be.
It's hard because you don't want to just throw it in there for just for the sake of it, do you? But maybe moving it a little bit might be a good idea. Yeah.
And I think because she's such an instrumental character who I think by the end becomes one of my favorites.
Yeah, good. Yeah, she's definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think that idea of duty, I think you do explore really well. Whereas Dayraven, he's got a different sense of duty that he feels later on, which is again just showing he's a nice person. He's flawed, but then he's got this sense of duty that he puts on himself. But she has a completely different type of duty where she feels responsibility for so much, and it's a huge pressure. And you really feel that. And again, whilst none of us have had that similar pressure, you sympathise with her for that, and there's that immediate connection.
Yeah, that's what I'm going for. And she's obviously much more mature as well.
Yeah, definitely. So further on, there was this little segment which I absolutely love, which is where you're describing this longhouse, this hall, and it's got all these carvings in, and it's all carvings of the gods telling a story, which is just amazing. There's a scene in God of War, the game. I don't know if you've played any of that, Philip.
No.
But I'm sure you've heard of it. But it's all Norse mythology, and as you go through the game, you kind of see these carvings on these doors that you open, and they all tell a little bit more of this story of the gods, and it just feeds into the mythology and also what the people did to show that, you know, what that they believed in the gods. There's a bit of artwork, which is you don't really get enough artwork, I think, in fantasy. But then if you Google fantasy, there's so much amazing artwork that people in our world make, you know. So I liked that touch because it just added a bit more to the mythology, to the story. I felt like it's something that, you know, Tolkien would do just to highlight his history before. So that's just a little thing I liked. And then the next set piece is that the whole fight after Oswy has died, and everything's a little bit up in the air, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's a
a
moment of crisis in this little idyllic place.
Yeah, and I think it's really well done, where you've established the characters, you've established the tone and atmosphere, and how Dayraven thinks, and then thrust into this situation, and how quickly things change. It surprised me because I was thinking this usually comes about a quarter of the way through, but no, we're straight in there, and it was done really well. And I think you really got that sense of urgency where obviously we're not sure exactly what the elf sleep is, and as the reader, we're not sure how serious this is, but through the urgency of all the characters, you have, as Ed said earlier, that sense of dread.
Yeah, your characters are your elves, Philip, are very different to Tolkien's elves.
Yes,
they are. I love that. It reminded me a little bit of, I guess, the Alfar from Old Norse mythology. And you know, the dark elves described by everyone else in Midgard as dark beings that really aren't people, aren't creatures that you want to be associated with.
Exactly.
Sometimes I think in literature, sometimes they're associated with say that are magic. So it's that I love that you've got that reflecting in here as well. You mentioned ghost ravens as well. That was just such a cool thing. I was like, ghost ravens, what a great name! You've got great names here. But I love that, and that Dayraven is kind of lured somewhere because he could feel a little bit like your chosen one, couldn't he? Which is obviously painting that classical fantasy thing, but it's that trope, but it's getting turned on its head where he's not doing anything or it's not really predetermined that it's him. He's being lured somewhere. So I like that it was kind of he didn't have ownership over it. It was just it was happening to him. And then the elf sleep was really intense. I was literally like sweating reading it. I was like, no. And then everyone else getting involved, and it felt like it was a catastrophe. And that through all the other characters' reactions, and it just felt like it's the end of the world for them because they were just panicking so much. everyone had a different reaction. You've got a different few characters that come into play later on, which are calling for his banishment, his death, all sorts. Which is really fun.
But also Erd, who is one of my favorite characters. Again.
Yes,
I believe Erd means fate, so I'm not a little nod to I think what she actually does here, how instrumental she is.
Yeah.
And Erd I thought was brilliant, and as I said, that whole sequence, I was just caught up in it. I read that whole sequence from beginning to end because I had to see where this concluded up into where Day-Raven is banished.
Yeah.
And I loved that scene where they're having this meeting, they're deciding what his punishment is going to be. And I felt really tense. I was thinking, surely he's not going to die. But after what happened to poor Oswey, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the death of Oswey again comes into motion, because it really makes you just think these characters aren't safe.
No.
And then that banishment and how much it changes the plot of what I'm expecting. I was thinking maybe someone will come, Day-Raven will want to go away, go to a war maybe, and there'll be different people come with him. No, that didn't happen.
It's straight in there, and I love because you set it up so well, as you feel like he's going to get at least a little bit more time. Being happy, it's going to go slower, but it's so fast paced, Philip, and it's brilliant and it's really good. I love that reviving scene, and Erd obviously it feels a little bit like she's kind of a Sather user because Sather wasn't very popular with especially men. They looked on it quite with distaste, we will say. And I love that there are other people who can use magic. They obviously the white robes as well, and they're men, aren't they? So it feels a little bit more like Gelder. So I love that Erd's a woman as well. That's really great, and that she's got this kind of relation to Day-Raven. And then the reviving scene is brilliant, and I love reading that.
Cool.
I think you captured a lot of emotion there as well. And then the folk moot was just intense. I think you've got some great dialogue, like who dares draw blade and stand fled. It's just little things like that just make you feel like they're just talking a little bit differently to how obviously we would really would say, what the hell are you doing here, mate? What are you doing? That kind of thing. So I really like that. It's just a touch that made it feel a bit more archaic, like we were speaking about earlier.
But then at the same time, you're playing on that greater plot with Bagsack being present. And I was like, I do not like this guy straight away. And because that symbolism again. And his presence, it shows that you're really achieving a lot in a small space. Having that going on at the same time as this whole scenario with Day-Raven. And I love the character of Day-Raven's father as well, how you really get across the mindset of the culture. I think in that moment, where his father decides, I'm just going to let him be banished because I immediately recognise that's the only option where he's going to live. And he's quite stoic about it, isn't he? And I thought...
Yeah, that's stoic. Yeah.
I thought that's just brilliant. The amount of the culture and the mindset that they have just put into one action straight away. And it just really enforced that the world they're living in.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Yeah, no, again, Bagsack is definitely... I tried to have a little fun with that character. And at the same time, though, he is a sign of connection to something bigger outside this little idyllic Shire-like, womb-like place. Because he does come from outside. He's sent as a kind of missionary from Torland, because you do have a situation here of fluctuation where you have an older religion with a pantheon of gods, and you have a newer religion that's kind of encroaching with that's monotheistic, and so we're at a point of change here, and it's kind of interesting to see how that sometimes can happen organically, and sometimes it happens violently, and all that depends on how it's handled. But in the case of Ord, who is definitely one of the characters that I enjoyed writing the most. She is a representative of the older ways, and it's no accident that she's a woman, I think, and opposed by the male priest, and that is also, along with this newer religion is coming a sort of a form of patriarchy that is a bit more oppressive, perhaps, than the older culture might have been. So.
And I think that you really get that across in Day-Raven. He doesn't really comment on it because you see that he doesn't have those same prejudices, but it's clever how I think him not commenting on it shows who his character is, but at the same time you do see that stark contrast. And I think this is also obviously a very key moment for his development, in the sense of obviously he's leaving where he's lived, but also I think it's where he's really shown the negative side to power and influence.
Yeah.
where he's saying that he's an innocent, and these influential figures opposing him and opposing what is right. He really sees it. I think that strips away. That's the beginning of his journey of stripping away his naivety and this disillusionment that we really see throughout, and was one of my favorite arcs of the story.
Yeah, thank you. That's I couldn't put it better myself, really. So yeah, awesome.
I think they go back to the folk mood. I think that was really, really cinematic. That whole sequence was really good. And I think the one suggestion I could have was maybe add, I don't know, just something to give it a bit more atmosphere, perhaps like maybe some mention of music or other things like that to make it a bit more of like an owl thing kind of thing. Like all things. So maybe just a few little touches like that I think would make it, just to make their culture stand out a little bit more, rather than like, you know, like the Northmen, their rituals, they had a few moments where they did things that we wouldn't really understand why they did it, but then if you know more about their culture than you do, it felt like a little bit alien. So I think maybe you have something like that, because this is so out of the ordinary. Maybe this could have happened in the past before that kind of thing. And it's something happened in their history that they have to then repeat in this folk moot when
that's a brilliant idea. I like it. Yeah
you love music being woven in stories, don't you?
I think reading more history, everyone even if it's just a hanging, they turn it into an event, don't they? And they use it as an opportunity to, you know, whether it's selling things or just to even just add more things, like reading the Icelandic sagas. The things they do is very atmospheric, and there's lots of different elements to them, you know. So
it's like a performance.
Yeah, exactly. Again, I've got some more nice words here. Oft must warm heart give cold reed. So I absolutely love that. It is a lot of fun. But I really felt the heartbreak of Dayraven at not seeing his family again, because there's a part where he's just staring into the glows of the fires at Kingsford, and he's just thinking of his family and what's being stripped from him. And I think that was like really powerful like segment there, and I really enjoyed that, and you felt his pain, definitely.
And that inability to see what's going to happen next. Whereas a lot of characters, they're like, okay, now you're going to go to point B and we know you're going to do this, but he just had no idea what was going to happen, and you really empathize with him at that moment, because that just utter just powerlessness that he has.
Thank you.
I mentioned that stark contrast before, and I think then soon after, I'm not sure how soon after, we meet Bledler as a perspective as well. And I think we see, he is dangerous compared to Bagsack, who Bagsack is dangerous, but he's not as subtle at his manipulation or as Bledler is, and Bledler is in a far more powerful position, and we see that in how he just he just like shakes his head at Bagsack, basically.
I think poor Bagsack is trying to please his superiors, but he's really bad at being a bad guy. He's just bad at being a bad guy, and he's a character that I don't know if this is, should I say this? Maybe I will. He's a character that it will appear again in the trilogy, and I hope in a way that will really open up him in a way that's much more complex than what you see in this scene. But I had fun. I had fun with the poor guy at this point. Yeah.
And I think I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but quite a clever technique to show someone who is in the same kind of order. And then someone who's far more powerful, and you understand how dangerous they are because you've got a comparison to make. Because when you first meet Bagsack, you're like, okay, this is what everyone is like, basically. But then you meet Bledler and you see, okay, this man is different. And Bledler is a really interesting character as we go forward. Where he does it first chapter, we think, okay, he is nasty. What is the creature you have that really? I think that nearly gave me nightmares. That there's kind of swallowed whole.
The Grudug.
The Grudug, that's it. It reminded me a bit like a Rancor or something in Star Wars. That pit in the middle where they're chucking it in. That was the moment when I was like, okay, you know, other things have a bit of classic fantasy elements, but this is very modern. This is very dark, and I like the way that this is going.
And then we see Bledler as a human being as well, how he gets frustrated, even though he's quite aloof in many senses, and feels quite entitled. But then you see this anger at something opposing him, and it's kind of that pride plays into it, doesn't it? And we learn the reason for that pride later on. But I love how it probes a few things in him that sends him a bit angry, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yes. And you know, in his mind, there's no difference between opposing him and opposing his God.
Yeah.
So that's where the anger is coming
Yeah.
from, because he doesn't see it as opposing him. He sees it as opposing Edan. And in his mind, there's nothing more immoral than that. So.
Yeah, and I'm jumping ahead a bit now, but it feels like a good time to mention it with him feeling like he's the chosen one. And that really subverted that. So like some people saying Dayraven is, some people saying Bedler is, but then you see him as human again because he has doubt. And how that plays into all of his decisions as well. I think it was really interesting where he still values himself as higher, and he justifies a way to be fair when it really isn't. And that's what makes him really interesting. Mixed in with the religion as we meet some of the other high priests. We see that they're not all unified as Bledler in some ways likes to believe.
Correct.
It was so interesting.
Good. Yeah. I mean, I tried to put in, well, I did put in a literal moment of self-flagellation there for Bledla. So
literal,
quite literal. And he's, I think perhaps he might come across at first as just pure bad, but I'm trying to also, again, he, in his mind, what he's doing is for the good of everyone. And in his mind, these acts of his that you might see from the outside as evil are acts of sacrifice on his part in order to bring about this greater outcome. You know, in his mind, the kingdom of the eternal is anything and everything done to bring that about is good. So so in his mind, he's the good guy.
And then how that links into these into Dayraven's plot as well. That was really cleverly done. I think that I love when plots where the characters, they might not meet each other, but whether they're hearing about each other. And kind of that unfairness again of this of a perspective being shifted, where okay, this is another viewpoint to look at it from. And I love it when that happens, because that immerses me even more, because then I feel like this is unjust, and I want Dayraven to do even better. And that plays into the whole next segment of Dread with Dayraven. You're like, it's not going to be easy for him from now on. And you kind of know that, but when Bledlow gets involved, it raises the stakes.
You are skipping way too far ahead, Will.
I'm sorry.
I've got my notes here. I will take over now for a minute, Philip.
I'll just leave for a minute.
Here. You wait, but no. I love the song of Bjormud, the Exile. That was great fun. It was a lovely touch, and again a song. And I'm just so glad it wasn't someone like Tom Bombadil singing it. I'm glad you haven't got anyone like that, because that would just be just too bad. But I really love that. I love all the songs anyway. But I think you've got a great balance of world building and the plot, going back to, I think the last thing I mentioned was the folk moot. So from there, it was just world building and the plot was all moving together forwards, and it was great. I felt like you're just really hitting your stride with these amazing like descriptions, and it was just so page turning. And I just felt like from the elf sleep scene, I was like, I've got to keep reading. I was having late nights, that kind of thing. That was really good. You had a really nice touch of Imhar's backstory when he was on the chat with Dayraven, and I love that you find out a little bit, and then Dayraven asks a few questions, which it tells the reader a lot, that the fact that he's asking questions, and the fact that he's kind of never really asked them before, might not have thought about it before, because he's just been in his own little bubble, and now he's kind of faced with this other world, which is really nice. There's a little bit where you talk about the war between, is it Caergillion?
Yeah.
There you go. And Torland, and talking about the murder of the priests.
From the prologue.
Exactly. I was thinking maybe could you make that into like in a conversation or even another song, maybe, or find out earlier, a little bit like that. I don't know if it came out a little bit late, but I think maybe you could mention that earlier on in Dayraven's chapters, just through like a passing comment, and then you could mention it the same amount as you have in that scene. So that could say almost the same, but maybe just bring it up, just remind the reader again even more. Maybe a couple of chapters before, perhaps, but that kind of thing. And the elf saying "join me" in Dayraven's head was so creepy. I was like really freaked out. I was just thinking, let's just imagine if that was actually happening, and he's just hasn't got any idea what's going on with him, and that would just feel so weird, wouldn't it?
That's one way to put it.
Yeah. I loved Bagsack calling Priest Bledler. That was so funny. It felt like a bit of a phone call, didn't it? And he was like, no, I haven't got time for this right now. And I love how you shift between the POVs then. I think you could probably even give Bagsack even more thoughts, make him feel a bit more like Glockter kind of thing, where he's I think it would just, because I know Bledler has a lot of internal thoughts which are very political, but you could make it feel even more apart from Dayraven's world, where Bagsack is in Kingsford and all that kind of stuff. Everyone's very different there, and then it would show what actually he was like in his own circle, how he's always thinking could be thinking bad stuff about Bledler, even moaning about him, that kind of thing, or
right.
But yeah, I love that. And then and maybe give him, I think that would make him a bit more human as well, so he doesn't, because you've already met him with Erd, and it would make him feel a bit more human, not like just like some evil wizard kind of thing, so maybe a few more internal thoughts, and like Bledler's, which are really great.
I like that idea, because it would also create that contrast between how Bagsack acts with Bledler compared to with Edan in Kingsford.
And that they're bitching about each other is it would be really good.
And I think it shows that facade that he's got as well, where he's here with a task, but he's got to hide parts of what that is.
Yeah. And he's
I really liked. Sorry, you carry on.
Oh no, nothing. I was saying, he's completely overwhelmed with it all. So
yeah. You always feel bad for him, don't you? But then there's
then you realise what he's doing. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. I really like that you actually showed Bledler's council, and we find out a little bit about Galdor, which must be a play on Galdor, surely.
Oh yes. Which in Old English means simply magic.
Yeah. So I'm glad that we find out about him from that side of the world as well, rather than just from Erd, because you're seeing 2 points of view about him, and it feels like it makes him even more important, kind of thing. Which I really like, but you did it in a way that wasn't exposition. You did it in a way that felt very organic. So that really impressed me when I read that bit. I was like, I was just happy to see that. Which
Picking up on that, I think it might seem like a strange comparison, but it actually reminded me of Macbeth, where you have I think 3 scenes before you actually meet Macbeth, but you hear loads about him, which builds him as a really powerful figure who you actually feel a bit intimidated to meet.
I can't wait for you to meet him. He actually you will meet him in book 2.
Brilliant. That's good. Yeah, I'm really excited. Yeah. I wrote Philip, the Grodducks are disgusting. Why would you create these, Philip? They are honestly awful. I'm surprised I haven't had nightmares about them since, but
that's what happened.
I spent a long time imagining these, and it actually made me feel sick. I was like, and how the next prison just starts to doesn't give in as well. I think I would have.
Definitely. And I love that you got some Old Norse names in there, like Orm. That is great. I like so. Just another little nod. There's a little segment. I can't remember whether you're using Old Norse, not Old Norse, Old English or Gaelic, but I really like that. It's kind of when they're talking about magic, that kind of thing as well. So was there any Gaelic in there?
So there was no Gaelic, but when they do the songs of origin, the magic, that's a completely made up language of mine.
Is it?
Yeah, it's just a complete, I don't know where it comes from. I just sort of go with whatever comes in my head, and I try to make it consistent in terms of the sounds. And there's a bit of a fake grammar at play there as well. And I know in my head what certain words mean, and how they would be conjugated. It's a highly conjugated language. So in other words, it's like Latin. You could put the words in any order. You can tell what the phrases mean from the endings on the words. But it's interesting because you mentioned Tom Bombadil earlier. It's not, I don't have a Tom Bombadil character at all. But Tolkien did get Tom Bombadil in some respects from the Finnish Kalevala, which is just an incredibly important work in Finnish. It's sort of like their national epic. But there's a character in there named Väinämöinen who is very Tom Bombadil-like, and sings his magic. And that's actually where I got the idea of Songs of Origin, was from the Kalevala, which is sort of an idea of just sort of going back in creation time and through this song, through this language, and being able to manipulate things in the present through this connection to this creation time. But yeah, so there is a sort of connection there, I guess. Yeah.
And so we cannot let it slip that you've basically made up your own language, Philip. So when I said you like Tolkien, there we go then.
I mean, yeah, it's I can't claim that it's as extensively created a language as what Tolkien did, but I think I did enough to, I hope, make it feel convincing. Yeah.
As a regular viewer of your channel, I'm sure everyone would agree with me that we would love to see some videos of you reading off that language, composing a poem or two. That would be pretty cool.
Cool.
And I think we can certainly say that you've done more of language than 99% of authors out there.
Yeah, definitely. The moment when Bledler kind of wrecks the prisoner's head was so gruesome, and I just love the tone that it sets for that section of characters. And then the king saying, "Well, Bledler, looks like you got it all out of him." I just couldn't stop laughing. And there's just there's just Abercrombie humor in there, isn't it? That dark humor, and that dark humor is way better than any other humor I think you could get. And the way you connect with characters most of the time is through humor as well, to start with as well. So that was the first scene with lots of those characters, and immediately you're immersed in their little their machinations. What was it?
You can say either way, I think.
Yeah. So they've got going on. So I really love that. And Philip, I'm a bit upset that you do murder a few goats actually in your books.
Now, sorry, and it's a pretty nice character who does it. Yeah, with apologies to your pet goats. Yeah.
No, Vito and Sonny are not impressed. Since having goats, it's so funny because we reread Shadow of the Gods and Hunger of the Gods, and Dad has a lot of offensive remarks about goats. He calls people goat humpers and all this kind of stuff, and we never noticed it before. And now we're a little bit offended. It's like, we are. What have these goats done to you? They've got a bad rep. I mean, Thor loved them, so maybe that's why. I don't know.
True.
But no, it is. I just thought I had to mention that, but that was great.
Yeah.
But the song of Folkwalder.
Yeah.
Was just amazing. I love it.
I mean,
so
I actually
much.
called Ed at midnight. I was like, this is the scene you meant. Ed was a bit ahead of me, and he said, there's a segment you're going to love. And then I read it, and I just, it's some of the most exceptional writing I've ever read.
Yeah.
And I called Ed at midnight, and I was like, this is it, isn't it? And Ed was like, yes.
Yeah.
And that is the one bit we had an extensive chat about.
Yeah, that was awesome. I think, there's a section in the Fellowship of the Ring. I can't remember if it's in the books actually, but Aragorn is singing about Beren and Luthien, isn't he? And Frodo's listening. It is in the books, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know whether you could get Elda to maybe sing it. Maybe Raven could ask her to sing it, that kind of thing, or because he obviously would, he would know about Folkwalder, and it's kind of a heroic aspect of life, that kind of thing. So
I think he says
maybe as a bit of just, he needs a bit of comfort from his home. He's left the one things he knows, it's all just been ripped away from him, and maybe a bit of comfort can come from that song. But I mean, it was
escapism,
alliterative verse. It was beautiful. It was very Beowulf-esque, and Philip, I was going to say it's a crowning moment on your work, definitely.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, you guys would obviously recognize this right away, but it is modeled on Old English poetry, alliterative, where normally the first three stresses in each line will alliterate, and then there'll be a caesura or a pause in the middle. So I mean, it's basically my modern ripoff of Old English poetry.
I've got it all written in my notes, so I can have that forever, because that is just fantastic. And I mean, again, we'd love to see a video of you performing that, Philip. That would be amazing.
Oh, wow.
Cool. It was one of those splashes we've been talking about as well, where it brings the world to life, and in such an extraordinary way, where you found a way to interweave these stories into the world. A bit like, I couldn't really name anyone other than Tolkien who's done that.
Yeah, that was so memorable. And I think, the more I read in life, is that the more I see that when people play to their strengths, that it makes their work stand out just head and shoulders above lots of other works, and keeps them memorable. And I think this is one of your extreme strengths, Philip, and I think it's so good that you're playing to it as well. You're not, lots of people would probably be put off of writing a song or a poem, that kind of thing, but it shows that you've got confidence in your writing, that you can do that. Did it take you long to write that section? Was that longer than some others, or was it quite natural for you?
It actually, because I spent my life since I was probably 20 studying Old English and translating it and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It comes pretty easily. It doesn't take me much longer than when I'm just writing regular prose, which maybe sounds weird, but because I've spent so much time doing that, it's something I enjoy. And now, of course, just like with the rest of it, I will go back and tweak it and think, oh, I think this word works a little bit better here, or the rhythm needs some adjusting there, or that sort of thing. But but I enjoy it. And the fear that I have is that I think most fantasy fans will confess to occasionally skipping the poems, so, which to me is sacrilege, of course, but but
they should be kicked out of fantasy communities for this,
you're going to lose your official fantasy ID card if you do that.
I think that often happens when there's lots as well, but I think that you bring it to the certain amount and it immediately captures your attention, and because you link it into the plot lines as well, and the current state of the world, I think it makes it feel a bit of a part of the story. Whereas I think some readers I've heard say that they feel like they're just taken out of it by these poems or songs. But because these weave so well into the actual story, they achieve something different entirely.
Yeah, for me, it's part of the world building. It really is.
Yeah. It's just another layer of immersion, and like I say, you use it for the story as well, which is great. There's another scene there with Erd, and she's in her house, in her hovel kind of thing, and then she's getting attacked by some not nice people, which I love the confusion and the style that you've gone for in that little sequence there. But I love how she uses animals to kind of help her. Felt a little bit like Radagast, that kind of scene, but not she's not as strange as Radagast, which is good. But she's definitely got that feeling of kind of otherworldly, ancient, and all-knowing, which and I loved seeing her power kind of thing, that she was able to. I was really worried that she was going to get bite the dust there, or something bad was going to happen to her, but I'm glad she did.
I'm not sure if this is something you meant as well, but the contrast of the magic that she uses compared to like Bledla seems very unnatural, whereas Erd's is unnatural as in like doing magic, but is completely natural in the sense of what she uses.
And we're such animal lovers as well, aren't we? Like that would be our dream, to be able to use magic in that. If we could choose anything, that we'd use it to communicate with animals, and you see the influence of Dayraven, his affinity with animals as well.
Will, you took the words right out of my mouth there, actually. I do, and it's something I hope that you see later in the later books too. There's a contrast between the ways in which these various parties, though it's the same magic, but the ways in which it's used in a more organic and natural way, where you see Urd doing it, and in a way that's more like mastering, in the way that someone like Bledla would approach it. It's a more masterful approach.
And that makes complete sense with the way you've explored the different cultures of like the different schools of thought, basically. You see it in history, in a military sense, of what different nations have specialized in. And I think that really reflects in the magic. Magic is seen as something used in the same way, where because it is real in this world. I think that the way it's explored seems very natural as well.
And there's another part that made me laugh so much when afterwards Bagsack has failed to capture or kill Erd, and he's just saying, "Not my fault, not my fault, not my fault." Just practicing his just saying he wasn't guilty. It's so funny, and I think that is a great kind of character moment where he just makes him again just stand out from your everyday bog standard fantasy character, a wizard. It makes him feel different, which it's just great. And really, I love that we're able to sit here and chat so much in such detail about this. This is awesome.
I'm having a blast.
Lots of books that that aren't even published yet that we could have read, that probably you couldn't talk in this much depth about, could you? So I think it's just impressive that you've been able to craft something like this, Philip, that we can talk this much about. But I'm loving it. There's I really like the toing and froing of the politics you've got between is it Arno and Joramun, which is great. It felt like Game of Thrones, that kind of Tyrion section, or before they're hanged, Glockta section, where they're all talking about each other, all the kind of scheming a little bit, and they're talking about rumors. I love that sequence with the rumors and that kind of thing.
Well, I've heard rumors about this, but they wouldn't be true, would they?
Yeah, I really like that, and I just love there's to and fro between characters that are meant to be on the same side. They're looking for the same thing. It just makes them all stand out, and they're all characters that when you see later on, you've already got this knowledge of them, which is great. And there is a section with Yoraman that made me tear up as well when he's talking about his mother dying. That definitely hit close to home, and if he loved her enough, then she wouldn't have passed away. That was what his thoughts were. And I think you could probably, I don't know whether it just made it mean more to us because of our recent experiences, or maybe other readers can relate. But I think you should probably end the chapter right at that bit, because he goes on to talk a little bit about his predicament still, and I think maybe just cut it off there, and then it's quite an impactful part to end that one on. So that would be my suggestion probably.
Yeah, and I was going to say this chapter as well, I think they do very well. Again, you do multi-purpose, a lot of these scenes seem, where you're showing that they're divided, but you're also creating more questions. Okay, what is the past of Bledler and these other high priests? What secrets have they got?
Yep, I get into that a little bit more in later books too. But yeah, Yoraman is a character that I have deep sympathy for, and I like in many ways. And there are aspects of him that obviously are not so laudable, let's say. But I feel like sometimes, well, he's right, and there are things that I'm hoping for his success in a way. And his whole motive for what he does in the book is something I'm trying to set up there with that loss, which is what's defined him as a man, as a person. That is where he's coming from. And I sympathize with that. So he's a character, again, whom I find myself really inhabiting him and thinking he's right, but there are things about him that obviously aren't so good. So
I think that's what makes people on the other spectrum so good, isn't it? So important and impactful on the story, because it's a little bit like Thanos from the Marvel world, that he believes wholeheartedly in what he's doing, and probably, if you think about it, he probably got a decent point, isn't he? But the way he's going about it, it's not what you can't do that. So I think it's another example of that, where you made them feel a bit more human. So which is great.
And going on alongside that human side as well, I think you do really well. We mentioned with Imhar, but also here that people have a great darkness in them, but they hide it, they suppress it, and they've got a facade. They live a facade basically, where they're different personality, but you see that stress on them at the same time.
Absolutely, and that facade is part of the internal politics, let's say, of the way. Which that whole part is really meant to sort of bring out. And I'm trying to say too that you can't paint all these people with the same brush. A little bit of little hair.
Is that a fly or something? I didn't know.
But you can't paint all these people with the same brush. There's such an array of motives and relationships with a religion that not everyone is the same. You can't say, oh, these people are all like this, or oh, these people are all like that. I deliberately made a scene later with Dayraven and Imhar meeting a priest of the Way who's actually a really great guy, a really wonderful person. So it's complex.
I think we're going to get onto that segment.
Yeah, definitely. But I think probably the biggest suggestion I have for the whole thing is the city of Wolvenden scene, of where Dayraven, they go to an inn, don't they, in this city, and then I think to me it probably felt a little bit too classic. It felt like a scene probably like I've read a lot of times, and I think
the tavern scene,
exactly. And I think for me as a reader, I know that the point that maybe is probably trying to come across is that Dayraven is quite naive. And they're on the run. Things haven't gone well for them, and then he walks into danger. He's trying to think of what Aratus said to him. It's a bit like Frodo thinking of what Gandalf said to him, by stay away from the road, that kind of thing. But they still go on the road. And I have one suggestion. It's probably rubbish, but instead of them even going into the city of Wolvenden, I wouldn't do that. What I was thinking you could do is, you've read the book The Road, haven't you?
Oh yes. Yeah.
And there's just one scene that popped into my head that maybe you could do, I don't know, but was there, they find this house in the forest in the road.
Oh, that is unforgettable.
It's the probably the best part of the book, the most intense. But I was thinking, I don't know whether you could have something, not that idea, but something similar to that, where they stumble upon this place in the forest and they know that a priest of the way is there, but Dayrhaven forces himself to go and maybe save these people in his house, or to do something like that, where he's putting himself in danger, but he does it rather than being in a naive way, rather than a way that the reader's like, no, don't do that. You know, I think, and it is, in a way, it's you've got your classic feel of him, the chosen one, putting himself in danger, but for a way that you really think he's doing it to save people. So
not just being an idiot.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, it's good that he's going to be an idiot a few times, and he definitely has his idiotic moments suddenly through the book. But I think that one, for me, I was probably I was willing something else to happen. Maybe not to go and subject himself under that, just to go for a walk, that kind of thing, you know. So that was the scene that popped into my head there. Obviously, you know, that maybe that could work, maybe not. Maybe you have other reasons for why you chose that. But yeah.
Yeah, cool. All right. Yeah, I will definitely ponder that suggestion. Thank you. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, I did really enjoy the escapades that Imhar and Dayrhaven have here.
Oh yeah.
That the relationship they have together really just blossomed here, I think. And it showed that they get a comfort in each other, and being around each other. And it's a bit like, I'm not sure if this is what you're going for, a bit of a sense of denial at the same time, that we're just having an adventure together, we've got each other, and they kind of just go with that. And it seems like they're almost consciously trying to forget what they're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the two of them are in they're like brothers. They think of the other as a brother, but there's this layer of complexity there because Imhar was a thrall. You know, he was, and I'm trying to show too that there isn't just a, you guys know very well from your reading that there are different types of slavery that have existed in the world.
Yeah.
And they're all bad. There's no good form of slavery. But thralls could be, in some ways, they had the option of eventually becoming free, for example.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily a permanent state. So there is, and sometimes they could even be, you know, a kind of part of the family. And that's what Imhar really was. But he was a thrall. And that is part of, there's this part of their relationship that sort of, it's a shadow on their relationship too, I think, in a way.
Yeah, the power dynamic.
That's unacknowledged. And Imhar is the older, and he's like an older brother, but you know, there is that power dynamic that existed as well.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm trying to, that he's protective of Dayrhaven. But at the same time, this is a man who has never had a chance to have his own identity. And that's part of this growing journey as well.
And that's followed by he's there to look after Dayrhaven.
Yep.
Yeah, he's like the Sam Gamgee who can actually fight as well, and has nice curly hair, that kind of thing. But I love that relationship, and like you say, it's got another element to it rather than just being two friends for the sake of it. It's like you say, that thraldom aspect, which is great. I think there's a part where Dayrhaven's talking to Imhar, and he's talking about how he wishes he could go back to his old life. It's kind of like that Frodo talking to Gandalf scene where he goes, "I wish the ring never came to me." And I really like that. I think you could probably even relate Dayrhaven's thoughts back to home even more. You know, whether it's just a passing line here or there. But I think just having it in just one sentence, maybe in every chapter that he's in, just like even if they're just having a good time or that kind of thing, he then thinks, "Oh, I wish I was having a good time with my father or my friends and my family back home." So bring it back to Kinsford a bit more.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. You mentioned his father a lot again, but I was thinking maybe a suggestion is you could mention Ebba a bit more.
Okay.
Especially, I think it was quite a powerful moment when her father tells her to look away from Dayrhaven. And that's a huge stab to him. And I think he could have like a flashing image over this time. And I think that whilst at that time showing, okay, they're in denial, they're having this whole aspect of their character development, you still have flashes that it's breaking through. And I think it would also maybe create a greater sense of urgency of, okay, Erd is obviously Dayrhaven respects her, but she's quite not panicked, but she's very serious about what she's set. sent Dayraven to do. And I think that those flashing images of how much his life has changed, and then we as the reader think of why that's happened, and I think it will maybe enforce that urgency.
Good, yeah, because he is still trying to hold on to this idea that he can go back to normal, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, which for
and
him
then
is going to be with.
Then we get to
maybe not him not even thinking of, oh, I wish I was going back to my old life. Maybe he's thinking, oh, I'm going to do this when I'm back home. I'm going to do that. I can't wait to do this with Ebba, you know, and saying it in such a way that makes him seem really naive, maybe. And Imhar, as the older brother, could, you know, obviously probably understands that won't be the case, but could be a good Imhar moment where he chooses to bring it up or chooses not to, you know. Maybe that way. Yeah. Excellent. And then we're approaching the company of Etinstone, aren't we?
Yes.
Which were a lot of fun. I love that fight with the brigands in the forest and the confusion. That was really great.
Yeah.
I think that was so exciting as well. And
I
didn't expect it at all, you know, because it came out right out of the blue. As for the characters as well, they're having this conversation, then all of a sudden there's a bit of a commotion up in front. I really enjoyed that thing. I think the brigands, it's another terrible detail from me, Philip, but the brigands use bows, don't they, on their horses? So maybe instead of slinging them over their back, they use, lots of people had like cases on their horses, on their saddles, they slip them into. So maybe you could use that, but if you just want to be a geek, I don't know.
Oh, I love being a geek, so thank you.
Yeah. But if obviously they're horse archers, so they probably have like these specialized cases, which would be pretty cool. I
never thought of that, and it's a brilliant suggestion. Yeah.
It's like well, actually, but, you know, the big glasses. But no, I would do that. But I loved it when they joined the company of Etinstone. Great name as well, and I just, the characters that come into play here, it just adds to the tone, and it turns Dayraven's world on his head again, and the whole part of them actually joining. I think the dialogue there was brilliant. It was like masterfully crafted, and they, you know, the toing and the froing between the characters, and you know what Dayraven wants to do, but you feel like he has to if he actually wants to get out of this situation alive. And it's just took a whole left turn that again was a massive strength of yours.
And I feel like a lot of authors can do this, but it'd be like, as we said, one of those screaming moments, don't do this, but they have no choice. They're told, you've ruined this, so you've got two options now. And I love how they're just forced into this, and Dayraven is just, it's like his dreams of what he's dreamed about before is actually becoming fulfilled, but there's a bit of taste to it now, because it's not quite the heroic way he imagined.
Yes, definitely. It's a pivotal moment, really, in the whole book, because it's really where Dayraven's journey goes awry, and there's a sense of that being out of his control, and you know, it was something that that was definitely a chapter I had to go back to a lot, and I had some help from my friend AP Canavan on that chapter. Some really great suggestions there, and of course. I'm glad you like the name Etinstone, because it is Old English. It's one I made up in my head, but it is from Old English elements, stone being very obvious, but Etin being word for giant, which Tolkien uses the word ent, that form of it, in his stuff, but it simply meant a giant. And there's all these references, as you guys know, to the old works of giants in Old English poetry, meaning the culture of the present, the Anglo-Saxons, would look on these ruins of Roman civilization and rationalize them as these must have been built by giants or something mythological, because it's beyond our technical ability to do stuff like this. So Etinstone is a name that reflects a bit of the history of this world, where you had a more sophisticated civilization that was shattered by a barbaric invasion, and they named this place from its ruins Etinstone.
Another bit of world-class world building. I love it.
I
love the Dveorgs as well, and I think they actually have my favorite religion, where they worship their ancestors. Now I absolutely love that. That was something I haven't really come across just ever really in lots of things, and I don't know whether that's, you know, you were inspired by history or sagas, or what kind of made you choose that, because it's such a good idea.
I wanted to make the Dwergs different, and in several respects, because they are, if anyone, they're the natives of this continent. Been there much longer than anyone else, and these other populations that came later on, and I'm started gradually, I think, giving a sense of how that happened in the past couple thousand years. But the Dwergs were there the longest, and they remember, so their religion just sort of popped in my head, honestly, the idea of ancestor worship, and being very connected to the earth, being very I wanted them to feel kind of organic and but different from these others who have their gods, whether it be a pantheon or the dual gods of the Andumai. They have a mother and a father, and that's also kind of, I don't know too many religions that do that either. There are just two gods, or the monotheism of the Way. So I wanted the Dwergs to be different, and it just sort of popped in my head. I don't know where it came from, honestly, but it makes sense to me that these would be, because they are dwindling people. It's almost as if it's a paradox, but the more they dwindle, the harder they grasp onto the past. And it makes sense to me that they would be very connected to their ancestors in that way. Because there's a
that important identity. It's moments like that just made me smile so much. Just something that you thought was so brilliant. I absolutely love that, and the whole ancestor part of it, and it comes into play later on when one of their band die and that kind of stuff. So that is brilliant, and I love how we find out about another people that are in this land and another religion as well, which come into play so different as well.
Yeah, and I love how that is kind of Dayraven and Nimhar creating relationships with other people.
Yeah, Dayraven makes an oath, doesn't he?
Yes, and I was going to say that oath, it came forward very naturally, where he's a bit like, I'm doing this, I'm not even thinking about it. And then afterwards, he's like, might have been silly of me, but I don't regret it. But then it's also a reason for this whole other culture he's met, for him to learn more. And it again shows what kind of person he is, that he is just obsessed with learning, isn't he? And it's also a reason for them to band together and form this really strong friendship, where they will sacrifice a lot for each other, because they have that respect for each other. Especially when it's reflected in the company of Edenstone, that there's a lot of prejudice and discrimination amongst these different groups, isn't there? And so then obviously I just think you've got the psyche of all these characters really well worked out, because with two other people coming in, and then they're just accepting the Dweorgs as they are, and vice versa. And when a lot of these people, you feel the biggest thing is they feel alienated.
Yes, I think, and no accident that Gnorn means sorrow in Old English.
Wow. Yeah. So that really, I do love that, because, and you really see that in what their actual purpose is, what they intend to do. And I think that it really just brings forward that attachment you have to characters. When it's very unique that there's not many characters in books where they have that motivation, and it is something truly unique.
Cool. Yeah. So that's my spin on dwarves, essentially. So I think I'm a little more conventional with my presentation of dwarves than I am with the elves. Certainly. I mean, my elf is. I'm going way back with the elf. That's something that you. There are references to elves in Old English poetry, and they are terrifying. They're just terrifying. They're otherworldly. So I'm really kind of going back to some much older stuff in that sense. But I'm kind of having my particular spin on dwarves, which I call the Old English word dwerg is essentially the same thing. That's the Old English word. And you'll see it in Tolkien where he calls it dwero, like the Dwero Delph and that sort of thing. That's same word, essentially.
It's again that traditional with the modern, where you've got these traditional fantasy aspects of elves and dwarves, but you're mixing them with new creatures, but also you're subverting people's expectations of what they've seen before in the fantasy genre.
Hopefully.
Definitely. And the company of Orvandil is great fun to read. What does Orvandil mean? Is it Old English?
It's actually more so. There is a reference to this mythological character named Orvandil in Snorri's Prose Edda. And there's a story of Thor, who is having a whetstone taken out of his head after an encounter with a giant by a witch named Groa. You know the story. And so Groa is doing this spell and saying, you just shut up while I do this. And Thor is babbling about how, I met your husband and I rescued him from the giants and I carried him in a basket, but his toe froze. So I snapped it off and I threw it up into the sky. And of course, Groa loses her concentration, and the whetstone part of it stays in his head as a result. But that star that results from that toe being thrown up is the morning star. And in Old English, there is the name Yarendel, which Tolkien totally took for the Silmarillion. You know the Silmarillion, Will, I know.
Yeah.
So you know who this is, and you know, again, the morning star connection with the Silmaril and all that. So and Yarendel, so there seems to be some connection with this mythological character and the morning star. And he's also interestingly used in the story that Saxo Grammaticus tells of Amleth, or Vendel is the father of Amleth in Saxo's story. So he's pretty much cut off from that mythological association. But that's where the name comes from. It was just, I loved the name, and I thought, again, it's like Day Raven. I thought, this is a cool name. Somebody should do something more with this.
It rolls off the tongue.
Yeah. Oh, it's a great name, and it leads into nicely the fight with is the Aglak, isn't it?
That's Old English.
That felt like a Sinbad movie. That was fantastic. I loved it, and it felt so cinematic. Everyone had their kind of the moment, and then Day Raven uses the elf gift, which is the first kind of point of him using something that has happened to him, and the elf power coming into play, and I loved it. And then all of a sudden, the creature is feeling fear, and it just made me feel like it was Grendel, that kind of thing. It actually felt that worry, that fear for itself, and that was quite a sad moment, actually. It's a little bit like, Lord of the Rings, when you see the trolls are actually slaves, aren't they? And then they're pushing the gate open. It looks a little bit sad, but anyway. And then High Priest Yodaman turns up, and I was like, no, I was literally holding my head. It's like, no, Day Raven's gonna get caught. It's gonna be awful. He's gonna die. Something bad's gonna happen.
Because this is the moment where all the plots are interweaving now, and you really feel the tension ramping up.
Yeah, and it is. Yeah, as soon as that fight happens with the brigands in the forest, you feel like all of a sudden, like, a new gear has been reached, and it's fantastic. And Day Raven's segment was just. You couldn't stop reading, but I love that fight. It was written really well. I think, the combat there is great. We'll talk about the combat later on, and obviously we're big nerds when it comes to fighting and all that kind of stuff.
Good. Yeah, I want your take on that for sure. The big battle at the end, the mandatory big battle. I want your take on that. But that encounter with the Aglach, and by the way, Grendel is referred to as an Aglach in Old English.
Is he? Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
So that's where that's coming from, kind of a swamp troll,
brilliant. Yeah.
That's where I'm getting that from. And that is a scene where I'm really trying to show you how this magic is very empathic. It is empathy-based magic. And that's very important to me, because I think it connects to kind of the impetus for this entire thing, being, again, talking about mortality and how we deal with it. And one answer that you see in Old English and Old Norse is do great deeds and your name will live on. And another answer you see in more like Eastern religions, perhaps, is the recognition of the connection between oneself and others and other lives all around us. We are part of each other. We're not just a community. We really are all one and the same. We're part of the same life force. And that's at the essence of this magic, is somehow you have to keep a balance between your perception of yourself and the stripping away of this illusion of separateness, because we are all part of the same. We're all stardust, essentially, right? So so that's a big thing I'm trying to kind of gradually show here. And David feels he is the Aglach there. And it is, I hope, a moment where, the chapter is called In the Monster's Clutches. And I'm trying to say, well, who's the real monster here? So
definitely. That's why it reflected with Grendel for me so much, that you feel that the fear, the empathy as well. You're feeling his fear and their worry, and I think the magic was used so well there, really good. And then obviously the moment.
And it's an integral moment for a lot of characters. It's that relationship of Orvandil growing and the whole company, basically.
It's like the company, it's always said, isn't it, in books and also in film and in real life as well, that you're not really best friends with someone, or you haven't got a bond until you've fought together and you've got that bond through fire and bloodshed and that kind of thing. And that's a great moment for them, because Dayraven probably, he probably feels like he's becoming part of something now, isn't he? And even though he's still got this, and he's being pulled in all these different directions, so you just start to see who he's becoming as a character. And also where he really needs to go. So
and it's a moment where he's actually doubting like what he's done, because after that, then it's with all the priests of the way, and he's like, "What am I doing? This is where Erd said not to go." And it's that moment of self-realization, where as the reader, you're like, you should have reached that earlier, but it's understandable because he's a young adult and he's caught up in the moment, isn't he?
He's been swept along. He really has been. The key moment there for me too is when he makes that vow to Ilm, Gnorn and Hawk's cousin, back in Etanstone, where she's somebody. She's not doesn't have a big role in this book, but I felt such a sense of myself anyway, of empathy with her, and the mourning that she's going through, as it's partly due to what's happened to them as a culture, but also the loss of her two beloved cousins in this moment. And she extracts this oath from Dayraven, and that's why he ends up because he is a loyal person. He takes that very seriously. So that changes everything in a way, that scene. But he ends up in the wrong place there, and having an encounter with none other than Bledla,
I felt so tense in that scene. And I think that him taking that oath, that he could have backed out before and like left the company and just snuck off basically with Imhar, but then after that there's no going back for him, because he feels that keen sense of duty, as I said earlier.
Yeah,
definitely. I've got another great line written here. Courage is when you fear cowardice more than death.
Yes.
I love it. That's so good. It's great that I can write lines like that I think it's just so brilliant, because I always do that when I read stuff. I always, these lines that are passages that stick out to me, I'll just jot down, probably just for me to pillage later on. Or, but it's got to be done, isn't it? But there's lots of stuff here that I've been writing down, Philip. So it's a testament.
And then you mentioned getting into that bigger battle, and I think you do the build up really well.
Because you've got the build up with Sequara, isn't it, as well? She's talking about Dayraven, trying to find him, and I'm really glad that you've Dayraven in the middle, and you've got the good and the bad trying to find him as well at the same time, which usually you don't have that. You only have the bad, and you don't see the good side until he's been rescued at the last minute, that kind of thing. So I really like seeing that side as well. And
I think that you subvert everyone's expectations again. With Sequara, you're thinking that she's going to bring along this other army and the alliance is going to work out, where they're at least going to hold, or there's going to be some survivors. And then she gets to her destination and they're like, you're too late. I was like, okay, this again, I just did not expect this. Usually you can kind of see a way that the story's going to go. You don't know maybe the intricacies, but you see most of it. But this, it really just swept me along in a good way, because you still have those questions that need answering that are keeping you pulled along at the same time.
Sorry, I was going to say that failure is very important in terms of her personal development, and it's not her really failure. I mean, it's not her fault, but she'll take it that way, and so it becomes even more important to her that she find Dayraven after that.
Because you can feel, it might have just been me, but you can feel this anger behind her at the same time. But she's focusing it on getting the task done, basically, and it's that sense that she feels powerless at the same time. But through this sense of duty that maybe she can change something, whether it would do anything or not. And that last battle, I have to say, I thought it was brilliant. I was thinking, I was not sure how you're going to be able to pull everything together in a satisfying way, but you really did, where there's this huge battle going on, which I love how a lot of the magic is used to control these beasts. And then a huge instrumental part of the battle is these people on both sides, these magic wielders, basically wresting control of these beasts. And that was so awesome.
And it's so great to have monsters as well. It felt like a Tolkien battle as well, or like a little bit like Kings of the Wild as well. You've got actually loads of monsters involved in this as well, but magic is playing such an important role of like you say, Will, control or trying to control them as well. Which is awesome.
And I think because that it hit a fine line of the Bledler, he's very powerful and dangerous, but he can't just destroy whole swathes of armies on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked that. But it's utilizing his resources as well as he can.
Yep.
Which I think it made them a lot more terrifying.
Yeah.
And the fact that Dayraven is on the wrong side is just that the whole time I was just thinking, how was he going to be wrested from this situation?
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up that he wasn't. But then the whole meeting of all these different characters was awesome. With Orvandil coming back, Imhar, and then there's obviously the Man of the Way sent in to watch Dayraven. And then Sequara, and how they all just link.
Yeah.
And I think the way you jump perspectives in those few chapters, I thought you did it brilliantly. It reminded me of in Best Served Cold, there's that scene with Abercrombie where they're all around the dinner table. And it was, whilst this is in combat, it was that where instantly you knew the perspective you're with.
Mm-hmm.
And there's Sequara just there, she's calm in a sense, but panic behind her. But then all these different characters, like, they have no idea what is going on. They're like, where's this person? And they've all got their different motivations and their priorities as well.
And me, the reader, I had no confusion at all, like what was going on, where people were. It was written so clearly.
Yeah.
And just, it swept you along, and it was just addictive, really. And it was so fast paced. And I think you had your the length of the chapters perfect as well.
But
we're really good along there,
because whilst there's no confusion, you really got across the mayhem of the battle. And again, not sure if you meant it, but there seemed a real art to the magic, which seemed it's quite beautiful in a way, but then you see the destruction it's causing. And I feel like you and Jimmy Nuts actually talked yesterday about how those different views of conflict. And I think that you got that kind of beautiful wedge to it as an art form, but also the brutality of war. And I think you had a really nice balance of that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, I worked hard on that chapter, and I actually wrote it before I read First Law. No, I wrote it before I read The Heroes. And when I read The Heroes, I was like, damn you, Abercrombie. Because he does that perspective shift thing. I mean, just brilliantly. And I'm sure it's been done by others as well, but I was hoping to convey exactly what you guys were talking about, that sense of chaos, that sense of, because you can take a bird's eye view of a battle and then get a sense of it from up there. Or you can go down, and you can do both too, but or you can go down there in the midst of it, and it's hard just to have any sense of what's going on. And so I chose more. I mean, there were moments there, like when Bloodless, Al-Makti or Wizard's Fire just destroys swaths of people. Where it's more of a bird's eye view, but mostly you're with somebody and it's just kind of jumping all over the place. So,
and I mean, it's important to me to read a fantasy book that it feels realistic. It feels, one thing I love about fantasy is that it can feel real, which is most of the time I want it to be real. I want Lord of the Rings to be real, that kind of stuff. And this felt like just brutally honest and authentic. And the Shield Wall as well was fantastic. I love seeing all that. And it was so much fun. And also, that you've got this intense kind of backstabbing as well, and then Hlok bites the dust, which is I was gutted about that. And Brond, what a little git. And then Imhar's moment where he's like, predictable, thanks for the lesson. I love that. And again, it just reinforced Imhar as a great character. He's so much fun. And Dayraven, all these characters meeting up in the middle. Which it builds to an amazing crescendo, and it is the payoff is so satisfying. And there are moments where you're just so invested that I was just holding onto my laptop reading it, like white knuckled. It was so much fun.
I was going to say, it's so satisfying. I think that especially in battles, I really look for epic but intimate at the same time. And often I think authors get one or the other. But you really hit both. I think through having that different perspective of going out to Bledler, who's seeing it more, he's a strategist, he feels pretty certain in himself, and he sees it as more of a sprawling mass where you see the whole image. But then you go into the chaos of what is going on with everyone else who is fighting through this battle.
It's like the Battle of Helm's Deep. You've got a wide shot, and then you're zooming into one character. You go back, do a wide shot, so you see it's a little bit like a chess match. You see everyone moving, and then you could zoom into a few details where it's character growth and you're worried for the characters, and then you come back out. So honestly, it felt a bit like Bernard Cornwell kind of writing. It was really good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I remember Peter Jackson said that he said that with Helm's Deep, he did a long shot and a close up. He alternated it on purpose. And that's what Dad uses as kind of a setup for a lot of his action scenes.
Oh yeah.
And I think, as I just said, you got that across with Bledler.
You get that sense of like mass mayhem, as well as you get the sense of the epicness, if that's a word, of what's happening with the magical elements, and then you get the brutality of hand-to-hand combat with Dayrhaven making his first kill, which was actually quite emotional. His feelings towards it, and he's thinking of this other person, their life and who they are, who they're leaving behind, that kind of stuff, and that was really powerful and which I didn't expect in the middle of a insane battle.
Those intimate moments,
so it's, I think a lot of readers are going to absolutely love this, Philip. They're just going to be taken up by the ride, which is great.
And I think a really a great thing that you did was really hard to achieve is, whilst keeping us in the moment, because of how well you set up the world. I was really thinking of the ramifications of this, and the effects this was going to have on the characters, but also the politics, the state of the world at this time. And I think that just ramped up the tension even more. And so I was thinking, well, if they escape, what are they going to do, basically? And then that leads into, at the end of the battle, you've established Sequara as a powerful force as well. And then it was quite satisfying thinking Bledler, something he doesn't know, finally, at the end of the battle, where he's like, I can't place my finger on that. I was like, good. And it felt really satisfying that I felt like a hatred for Bledler, even though he's a very conflicted character who is well realized as well.
Yeah, well, he's very sure of himself most of the time.
Yeah. Or he justifies it. He has that doubt, and then he thinks, no, it'll be fine because I'm pretty perfect.
Yeah. But I think everyone has a great moment. If you pinpoint where the different characters in the battle, they all have their own moment to shine or to not shine so much. And which is great. I think Captain Orvandil has a great moment with Imhar as well. And then it was brilliantly paced, and because it had so many characters involved in, I think it just added to the tension as well. And there were so many different, it must have been so hard to balance what was going on. And I think after that, the main thing to talk about is how it sets up kind of the very last few scenes, and how it sets up book 2. And we need it, Philip, because that ending, I've really got emotional with that decision Imhar makes. And it's the first time that he's put himself first in a way that he knows Dayrhaven is in the best hands possible. Where the whole time he's thought, I'm the only person who can look after Dayrhaven at this time. And if finally he feels this kind of guilty relief that I think you might explore in book 2. Because and you see that he didn't really realize he had within him.
Exactly, that he's had this strain on him the whole time, but he's, again, that suppression that he's had. And I think that I'm really looking forward to seeing his development in book 2. And then obviously you see the state of the politics as well, that this army of beasts and magics are just going to come crashing down on the rest of these kingdoms, and they've got to get their act together to try and sort of put aside their age-old enmities, which you built up so well with all these stories, which you're showing they've been enemies for so long. I forgot to mention like the speech of King Erkenwild, and that was great with that, and Dayrhaven's fighting the elf in his mind, isn't he? And I love that. But I think that the politics between the countries is just brilliant, and I cannot wait to meet Gelder in the next book. And I'm not sure if I said it in this video or if it's a spoiler-free one, but I think you do the quieter moments brilliantly. And I think that you have moments of reflection where they're thinking of what has just happened. For most of them, the most important day of their life in terms of where it's going to lead them next. And I think you really got that across, that they're all kind of in shock. But there's characters like Sequara, she's just set on, okay, this is the next step. And she's got that planned out. But it limits her scope because she wouldn't even let herself think of what else is going on. And all these different characters, I think that you really, after following them, mostly in different plot lines for the book, you have those moments together done really well and really satisfyingly.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's, you know, aside from just the fact that you're saying nice things, it's so gratifying to me that you guys are getting stuff that I was trying to do. And it's like, wow, okay, yes, this worked. Yeah. So I'm just thrilled with this, and also very grateful for the editorial suggestions, which, I mean, you guys are definitely more knowledgeable about, let's say, weapon craft and what would be a more realistic portrayal of, you know, how someone would wear a sword, you know, and something as simple as that. These details are important, I think. So I'm really appreciative of all the suggestions, the big ones and the little ones. Just fantastic. I couldn't have asked for a better audience, really. So just thrilled.
As Ed said earlier, that it would be hard to talk about a book for this long with most works, and to talk about this with you is it's an awesome opportunity, and there's so much more we could have said, but this has just been brilliant talking through what our thoughts were, and again, as I've said, it was an honor of ours to have the chance to read it.
And we cannot wait to be holding the book in our hand one day, Philip, and reading book 2 as well, and book 3, and then is it you have a standalone written as well? Is it after?
Yes, I do. I have, well, books 1 and 2 are really, in my mind, very polished. And book 2 is ready, as ready as book 1. And in my opinion, I think that people are going to like book 2 more even than the first book. And book 3 is the one that I feel is the most interesting. So I hope that people will enjoy this, and that they'll get things that you guys obviously got, and I'm just thrilled with that. I'm very much hoping that I can get you to read the second book as well.
You won't have to twist our arms or anything. It's fine.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys, really. I mean, I'm very touched by this, and the fact that A, you would be willing to do this for me, and B, that you're so insightful and kind and helpful about it, and C, that you would sit down with me for all this time and have these conversations. So just thank you so much. I can't emphasize that enough.
Well, thank you so much for sending it to us in advance. You know, we're so lucky, and when we got it through, we were so excited and reading it, and now we can actually talk about it as well, can't we? Which is great fun, and you know, and talk with the author as well is so great, and it's so nice to read something that's right up our street as well, which has got all these different themes in that we really connect to, as well as doing it with someone who's our friend on BookTube is a privilege. It's an honor. So thank you for having us on here, and thank you as well for sending us the great book.
Yeah, such a pleasure, and I hope one day to be returning this favor, that I will be reading books by William Gwynne and Edward Gwynne someday, and perhaps you know, if that would be a wonderful thing, if I would be able to read your stuff someday, because I know that you both are thinking about stories, actively writing, and learning the craft in a way that I admire so much, and I wish I had been half as smart about that when I was your age. So I foresee great things coming from you guys.
Oh, thank you. I know if I ever publish anything, I'd write Edward in really small letters, or Edward John Gwynne.
You've got a good mentor there. That's for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, we're very lucky, and we're in a great community as well. So it's hard not to kind of be inspired as well, especially when we read things that are so great. So yeah.
All right. Well, let us say goodbye then, and thank you again, and thank you everybody for watching this video, which went by really fast for me. But when I look at my phone, I see that some time has gone by.
I can't believe that.
Neither can I.
Yeah, but thank you so much. I just enjoyed this thoroughly, and truth and courage, guys.
Truth and courage.
All right, bye-bye.